biblical appeals, and we are looking at principles that you have to do a little bit of mining. You got to get your shovel, you got to get your pick out, you got to do a little sifting and separating in order to find this, but it's there. And there is an approach to dealing with those who have authority over you, so that we have, in some instances, not always, sometimes we are given the privilege of suffering for Christ's sake without having done anything wrong. And sometimes it's God's plan for you to go through suffering and misery, even if you've done nothing wrong, and there's no option, okay? You don't get mad and storm out of the room. You don't get mad and make obscene gestures at people, unless you're a lost person. You don't follow them on the freeway and shoot at them. You don't wait until you get out of prison and then shoot your uncle that you've had a grudge against, like Mr. Mejia did. But we have an opportunity to make biblical appeals to those who represent the government and wield authority in our lives, those who represent our employer and have authority in our lives, insofar as we choose to maintain the employee relationship. Because remember, bottom line, if you don't like it, you can always quit, right? Unless we still have slavery and indentured servitude in the United States. No, that's just in Muslim countries, okay? That's not in North America anymore, thank God. Thirdly, we have this relationship with authority figures in our lives in our family unit, okay? And then we have that with respect to our congregation, okay? Because the congregation holds church members accountable for our conduct and the way we live our lives as we represent Christ. Now, last week, I talked a little bit about right timing, and I wrapped it up. I finished everything I wanted to say last week, and then I realized there's something else that I should have said. Remember, I was talking about making the appeal at the right time, and how, you know, my mom would be taking her afternoon nap, and she's about, 3 sheets to the wind, and she's just starting to drool a little bit, And I'd say, Mom, can I go out and play? Okay. And I knew she didn't want me to. But if you ask her when she's like semi-conscious, the answer for her was always yes, okay? Sometimes kids are particularly adept at staging requests that way. So let me make one additional comment about the timing of a biblical appeal. A biblical appeal... Now, can I cite you chapter and verse on this? No. This is my opinion, okay? So please listen carefully. A biblical appeal should not be communicated via technology. In other words, there really shouldn't be something between you and the person that you are seeking to communicate with. So you do not make a biblical appeal via email. You do not make a biblical appeal by means of texting. You do not, I don't know what they call it if you're part of the Borg and you're part of the Apple cult. If you're Microsoft, it's called messaging. What does the Borg refer to it as? Sarah? That's communicating from Apple to Apple. What? What did she say? iMessage? Is that what it is? Okay. I would not suggest making a biblical appeal by means of that. I just don't think that those kinds of things are recommended. If at all possible, your appeal needs to be a personal encounter. Okay? And my recommendation, it should be after you enter the room. You walk up to the person, you shake the hand, you do just a little bit of the social dancing that's prerequisite. How are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine. Good to see you. That's fine. You don't just go blasting into a room and say, and start asking, okay? if at all possible, it needs to be a personal encounter. Perhaps in the case of an emergency, like if you're in Los Angeles and your boss is in London, maybe if you've got you can't get on a plane and fly to, maybe Skype, right? But my recommendation is try to make it as person to person as is humanly possible, where there are personal words exchanged. As well, your appeal should be made in a private setting. And without witnesses of any kind. It's not because you're trying to do something wrong and you don't want anybody to see you. It's because the person that you are appealing to should not be made to feel that you are applying pressure by having somebody overhear the conversation. Let me give you an illustration. How your child's auntie will approach you. Now, this is going to be happening to you, Brittany. This is going to be happening to, I'm sure it's happened to Monica, I'm sure it's happened to Marina, I'm sure it's happened to Joyce, I'm sure it's happened to April, where your kid is little, okay? I'm sure it's happened to Janice and Kelly. Your kid is little, and somebody walks up to you with your little kid there and asks you if she can. Don't ask in front of the kid. Why? Because that way the kid knows that you said no. And that adult should know better than to put you on the spot where you have to make a decision, and the result is that you're ending up the bad guy to your own kid. If that adult wants to ask for, Bobby Joe to spend the night, okay, then she should ask Bobby Joe's mom without Bobby Joe being there, okay? So that if you're just not comfortable, you can say no without your kid being mad at you, okay? Can any of you give an illustration of how sometimes kids do that? Your boy or your girl walks up with the best friend and says, "Can so-and-so spend the night?" Okay? And that doesn't really give you the option of saying no without you being, bad mommy or bad daddy to the neighbor kid. Okay? And you may have valid reasons why you don't want your daughter to spend the night at somebody else's house. That other family may have boys. My daughter never stayed at a house where there was a boy in the house. Excuse me, overprotective father? You betcha. My daughter was never spend the night in a home where there was a boy. Why? Because I don't want to have to kill some kid later on. I just don't want to have to choke the life out of him with nobody around. For, "You touched my daughter, you stupid little," I just didn't want to go there. I'd heard too many horror stories growing up about what some girl's older brother did with her best friend, and so we just didn't go there. And do I want to tell people, no, my daughter can't come over to your house because you have a son and I'm afraid that he's a rapist? Well, I'm not going to say that to anybody, right? So I have to come across as the arbitrary father who says no for no reason. Now, I've got reasons, I'm just not going to tell anybody what they are. Okay? I don't trust your son. I don't trust him. I think he's evil, he's wicked, he's mean and nasty, and I don't trust him. You do not shackle him to his bed at night like you ought to. I don't know how you keep your firearms stored at your house. Do you have trigger locks? Do you have a gun safe? I want to know these kinds of things before my daughter spends the night at your house. And so I think you can understand. If I had a son, I'm not sure that I'd let the kid from down the street with ringworm spend the night at my house. or impetigo, or head lice. You know? I want to have the option of saying no without having to explain all my reasons. Do moms and dads have all kinds of reasons that they don't want to share with people? They're valid reasons, they're legitimate reasons, they're reasonable reasons, but it's nobody's business what the reasons are, not even the kids' reasons. So that's one of the reasons why the first 5 years you're raising the kid, you spend your time teaching the kid to just shut up and do what you're told. Because there are some good reasons for decisions that moms and dads make that you've got no business telling anybody else. Consequently, an appeal should be made in a certain situation so that the person you're making the appeal to doesn't get embarrassed or seem obnoxious to somebody else. Okay? I promise you, Everett Moyer is not going to want Alexis to walk up to him with her best friend standing next to her at the age of 6, saying, "Daddy, can I spend the night at Mimi's house?" Everett would much rather Alexis ask him that question when she's alone with him, without Mimi hearing about it or even knowing that Alexis is going to her dad to ask. I would bet beans to buckshot this was a problem that Eisenberger faced. Yeah, I've been down this road before. Okay? So, for that reason, you need to be really careful when you're making an appeal. And it may not just be child to parent. It may be worker to boss. You don't make an appeal to your boss with another worker standing next to you. Why? Because your boss may like you better than him, and he may say yes to you, but not in front of him. Because what you ask for, he's willing to give you, but what you ask for, he's not willing to give to the other one. That's the reason why these laws, where they're trying to publish everybody's pay so that everybody knows how everybody makes, the only thing that's going to cause in the workplace environment is lawsuits. That's the only thing that's going to cause. Lawsuits. You know, you're giving him more than you gave me, and you gave her more than you gave her, and you gave him more than you gave her. Sue, 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 sue. It doesn't have anything to do with you got differences in education, you have different work performance habits, you have different show-up times at work in the morning, you have different rates at which you check out because you got tummy ache and got to go home. So your appeal should be made in a private setting and without witnesses of any kind that would make the person you are appealing to feel that you are applying pressure or putting that person on the spot. You may end up hurting yourself by having somebody else there standing next to you or catching that person appeal to your boss when his boss is in the room. Those kinds of things need to be thought through. And as I said, children should never be allowed to ask their parents for something in front of their friends or any other adult, because really, I know we like to say that our children are sweet and innocent, but my goodness, kids can be very, very sophisticated manipulators, can they not? Oh my goodness. How many of you remember making a decision with respect to your son or daughter, and the next thing you know, your son or daughter is talking to the other parent, asking exactly the same thing, hoping that he or she can get from mommy what she couldn't get from daddy, or get from daddy what she couldn't get from mommy? How many of you remember that? Happens all the time. Happens all the time. It's called wedging. You know, that's the reason why fathers need to be very careful. Say, well, I'm glad my kid asked me a question. I'll just make the decision. You probably should say something like, let me talk to your mother before I give you an answer, you know? And then you talk to mommy and find out, did she ask you if da-da-da-da-da? And she says, yes, she did. And I told her no because of this, 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 and she hasn't done her homework yet. Oh, see, moms think of things that dads don't think of. How many of you found that to be true? Yeah, in the reasons why you should say no. And then, of course, the kid comes back and says, will you never, or you always, right? As soon as they use the word never, and as soon as they use the word always, they no longer stand in relationship to you as a person who has any business making an appeal. Why? I think we're going to get there this evening. So we've looked at right standing, right basis, right timing. I just finished a little bit of extra on that from last week. So fourth, to make a godly appeal, you must convey right information. Okay? Remembering that appealing to someone is not manipulation. It's not supposed to be. Okay? Be very, very careful when you make an appeal to someone that you give correct and full information to the person that you want to make a new decision, right? For example, a police officer pulls you over. He has decided he's going to write a ticket. You decide to make an appeal to him, not to make a new decision because he's stupid and doesn't know how to think, but because there is a factor that he has not considered in his preliminary decision to write a ticket. For example, he doesn't know that your wife in the next seat is in hard labor, ready to deliver. Then he will say, follow me to the hospital. He'll flip on lights and sirens, and he will lead the way. You see, you've asked him to make a new decision based upon new information he didn't have before. He thought you were just driving fast down Huntington Drive. You weren't driving fast down Huntington Drive. You were trying to get to a Methodist hospital so that somebody else could deliver your first child, not you. Okay? So, if you do not, by the way, if she's pregnant, she better be in labor, because that police officer may hang around ER long enough to find out whether or not you're telling the truth, okay, or whether you're just creative, you know. Because mommy may be pregnant, she may just not be ready to deliver, okay. And if you do not convey accurate information to whoever you're talking to, whether it be, you know, an officer of the law or your boss or your parent or something like that, if you don't convey accurate information, you're actually lying, aren't you? You're being deceptive. You're engaging in an attempt to manipulate. Why is that thing still on? It's very warm up here. A legitimate appeal, then, should include information about both the negatives and the positives that need to be considered. Okay? So, if you're asking your boss to make a new decision, and you tell him what is the upside of making the decision that you favor, yeah, I think it will help you, I think it will help me, I think it will help the company for this reason, this reason, this reason, and this reason. You need to also be very, very careful to let your boss know, oh, by the way, boss, before you finalize your decision, there's a couple of downsides that you need to deal with, okay? You know, HR made this ruling, okay? And facilities management made this decision, and then there's the budgetary thing. So you're going to need to weigh these possible benefits to these possible drawbacks. So we think it will help the company, but it's going to cost considerably more, and your boss is going to want to consider both of those. And it's especially important when you know that the negatives might very well cause the person in authority to make a different decision. Let me give you an illustration. Dad, can I go watch a movie with Billy tonight? You got your homework done? Yes, sir. What time does the movie start? 7 o'clock. What time do you think you'll be home? No later than 9:15. Okay? as your father is preparing to decide whether or not you can go to a movie on Thursday night, you'd better not keep from him the fact that you have a test tomorrow. Because he's going to find out about that. He's going to find out that you have a test tomorrow. Okay? So you need to let him know you've got a test tomorrow. And if you think it would be in your best interest to go to the movie, even though you've got a test tomorrow, then you might try to fly one by him like the pastor did. You know, the pastor, when he went through Oregon State University, he always went to movies the night before finals, because he found that he made really good tests on finals. He did really good on his finals if he went to a movie the night before to unwind and relax. And by the way, I did. Anybody ever heard of the science fiction writer Isaac Asimov? Isaac Asimov, whenever he'd go get writer's block, and he wrote more than 200 fiction books, as well as 200 science books and textbooks. And when he'd get writer's block, he'd go to a movie, and while he's watching the movie, his mind would kind of relax and loosen up just a little bit. He'd go back home and he'd work for 2 or 3 more hours. So some people are that way, and if you can convince your dad that that's the way you learn best, well then, more power to you. Just trying to help you. Amen? Just trying to help you. And you need to always present the potential negatives. Like when I was talking to Margie Rashid about her appeal to her husband Razmik so that she could quit her job to stay home and raise their first child, Armin. I told her, I said, you need to really lay out in front of your husband the financial downside of you quitting your job. The fact that there's a significant loss of income by you staying home. And if you don't say that to him, now obviously he's going to already be aware of that, but you don't want to try to sneak that one by him, you know. You don't want him to think that you're trying to slip that one by him. But what you do is you let him know that even though there's going to be a significant loss of income, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that the financial benefit to a couple by a working mother is almost eaten up by the increase in clothing, the increase in a second car, transportation expenses, and the number of times that you eat out instead of fixing a meal at home. And so she told Razmik, honey, the hit on us financially is not going to be as much as we might think it would be, because you know how I know how to cut corners and clip coupons. So she was willing to share with him the possible downside, but then she bolstered herself on the other side, and lo and behold, he said, yeah, I think it's a good idea. I think you should stay home, give your boss 2 weeks notice, and let's do it that way. So I know you won't want to do that, but if your appeal comes after prayer and your appeal comes after seeking God's will, then you should be confident that telling the truth and conveying truthful information, both pro and con, will produce results that are not so much what you want, but what's pleasing to God. And the ultimate end of making an appeal to an authority figure in your life is to glorify God. Not to get what you want. It's so that God will be pleased, so that God will be happy, so that you'll end up having God's wisdom involved in the outcome. So that's right information. Anybody have a question about that? I think it's pretty obvious, but sometimes, you know, sometimes the little critters just don't want to tell you both sides, do they? You know? They just don't want to tell you the negative side. And there ought to be consequences for that. If you're dealing with a child that only gives you the pros in making an appeal but refuses to give you the cons, there should be penalties associated with that, you know. Just like a parent that if you've got, for example, a teenage kid that doesn't do what you say, that teenage kid's got no business driving your car ever. You know, Excuse me, you're not going to do what I say? Yeah, you want the keys to the car? What do you think, I am stupid? I'm not stupid. Do I look stupid to you? No, you are not going to have these until you do what I tell you to do. Amen? Now, does that sound crazy to you? How many of you think that's wrong? I think that's right. Okay. It's what's it called by attorneys? Quid pro quo. In other words, I'll scratch your back, but you got to scratch mine. I don't take care of your itches and you leave me itching. We have to work together, you know. Boss and worker, a citizen and police officer, parent and child. My goodness, who is so insane that thinks it just has to go one way? It's not supposed to go one way. Let me share with you the fifth thing. The fifth aspect of making a biblical appeal. To make a godly appeal, you must display the right attitude. Attitude is so important. I will spend considerable time expanding on this later on, but the right attitude is the result of a spirit of meekness and humility. Okay. In other words, you're approaching the person in authority, whether he represents the government, whether he represents your employer, whether he's the head of the house, whether it's someone in the congregation. You're approaching the person in authority with humility, not to make demands, but to ask for consideration and to request deliberation concerning something that is important to you. Never deny that it's important to you. If it wasn't important to you, you wouldn't say anything. Okay? Acknowledge that it's important to you, but that you also believe that it is important to the person that you're appealing to. Yes, this is important to me, but I believe it's important to you as well. And let me, if I may, explain to you why I think it's important to you. Some people have some serious problems in this area, don't they? I mean, they really do. They really do. Some people are so proud in their spirit that their countenance, their body language, their tone of voice basically screams that despite what they say, for example, if I were walking up to my boss and I wanted to make an appeal, I would knock on the door. He says, "Come," open the door. "You got a few minutes, boss? Is this a good time?" "You know, actually, I got just a couple of minutes." "Yeah, come on." He said, "No, let me wait for a better time." Because you don't want him to rush a decision. So you come back at another time. And you knock on the door. He says, "Come." He says, "Is this a good time? We got, 15, 20 minutes? He says, "Oh yeah, I don't have anything going on for probably another 40 minutes. "Great. Are you sure it's okay?" "Great." You come in and do whatever's appropriate. You sit down. And can I mention something to you? Is this a good time? And he says, "Sure, go ahead. What is it?" And then you rehearse to him what you have practiced for the last 24 hours. In other words, the first time your boss hears it, better not be the first time you say it. It better not be the second time you say it. It better not be the third time you say it. It should be like the 10th or the 15th time you've rehearsed this so that you know how to get through it. Okay? Here's what you don't do. I want to talk to you. Really? So, regardless of what comes out of their mouth, the body language and the tone of voice screams, "I'm asking you to do this. However, if you do not grant my request, I'm still going to do what I want to do." "Oh, you are? Well, let's see how that works out." There's also those who convey the idea, I'm asking you to do this, but there'll be hell to pay if I don't get my way. Now, I would hope that a child would not say that to a parent, because the dental bill would be significant. But sometimes employees do that. Well, you know, instead of doing that, just go ahead and quit, because you got no future in the company after that, right? I mean, Brian, can you imagine a guy thinking he has a future in a company after talking to his boss that way? It is not going to happen. So if you can't deal with the person with meekness and humility, you walk in there and you try to throw your weight around, and you got this bad posture and this bad countenance and this bad tone of voice, what must run through the mind of someone who acts like this? Can any of you relate to me a workplace situation where you saw somebody doing this? Anybody? Am I the only one who has seen these things happen? Really? I'm the only one? Am I the only one who has any workplace experience? And I haven't been in the real workplace in more than 40 years. Come on, folks. None of you? You're just not cooperating tonight, are you? I remember when I was a head lifeguard at a vacation resort, I had a couple of lifeguards do that to me. Oh, really? You remember, of course, that I'm the guy that writes the schedule. You remember, of course, that I'm the guy that decides how many hours you get each week. You remember, of course, that I'm the guy that decides whether you get up at 8 o'clock in the morning to open the pool up, or whether you get to work at night so that we can go over to the restaurant after the pool closes to eat desserts made by the chef. And yet they would still talk that way? Nobody had any of those kind of experiences? What do you guys talk about in the break room at your work? Yes, ma'am. Well, talk to us. No names, please.
One of the workers called out the supervisor in front of everyone, or the supervisor came in and said something to this person, and she turned around and said really loud, "Do you want to do this here in front of everyone?" She just called her out like that.
That's not wise. CR, tell us.
Yeah.
There had to be a reason you came back in.
Yeah. I was running a project, and I hired apprentices to do some dirty work, and they'd been on it for a couple of weeks, and one of them came up to me and he goes, "I demand you teach me something." He didn't say anything, just, "I demand you teach me something." And what I taught him was that he was getting laid off on the very next day.
Yeah.
I did. I got his check, and he was gone.
Yeah.
I only needed the apprentices for that project.
Lee, you had to have some guys who pulled that on Larry, huh? No? Been too long ago? Yeah. Is the clutch slipping so badly you can't remember? Let me tell you a classic one, because you can learn these lessons everywhere. I'm sitting in a chair, sweating profusely. My mouth is open. I'm in Archie French's office. That's back in the days when he shoved his fingers into people's mouths for a living. Archie had just hired a dental assistant. And I'm in the chair. Archie's here. She's here. And she's mixing up a 2-part epoxy of some kind. And I can't remember what it was, to make an impression or something like that. And I knew it was her first day because I'd been introduced to her. This is her first day. And then Archie says, "Now when you mix that up, don't use so much of that." And she said, quote, "It doesn't matter." Her first day was her last day. Talk about stupid. Stupid. You don't say that kind of thing to your boss unless your boss is just a complete chump. But, you know, maybe government work you can do that, because it's so hard to fire people from the government. But when you're dealing with somebody that owns his own business and he has the absolute right of hiring and firing, oh my goodness. And I'm sitting there, and I didn't react or anything. But as soon as she said, "It doesn't matter," do you realize what she was doing when she said it doesn't matter? She was telling the expert that he didn't know what he was doing. And she was telling the expert he didn't know what he was doing in front of a patient. The reality was, she did not know on several levels what she was doing. How do I know that? Well, first of all, she was under the age of 30. Second of all, she had just gotten her training. This was the first office that she'd worked in. And she didn't have any really idea of the stature in the profession of the person she was working for. Because when this guy was practicing dentistry, he had an international reputation. An international reputation. I remember one time 30 years ago, sitting back there about where Adriana is now, we had a guy from Northern California who was down in Southern California for a big dental conference. And he had gone to dental school with Dr. French. And at the end of our Bible study, we're taking prayer, and he stood up and he said, "Pastor, I realize that I'm a guest here, but may I give a testimony?" And I said, "Sure. What am I going to say? No? He's made this appeal to me in front of all these people. I can't say no." So I said yes, but I didn't like it much. And apparently, when he and Archie had gone to dental school together, he was a Christian and Archie was not yet a Christian. But he stood up and said, "I just want you folks to know that you will never realize the stature of the man that attends this church in his profession. You will never understand the high esteem in which he is held by his colleagues. Because you don't move in those circles, you have no idea of the stature of the man that you have attending this church." And he said, "I just want to praise God for Dr. French, the fact that he is a Christian, and the fact that he's in a good church, and I'm glad to be here." Now, that's the person this young dental assistant said, "Oh, it doesn't matter." She had no idea. That's like saying to, and I'm using hyperbole, of course, that's like saying to Stephen Hawking, you don't know math. Or to Einstein, "You don't know math." No, that's not true. That's not true. So just be careful how you deal with people. What must run through the minds of some people? Think of this. Think about your own future and your own well-being. Can such a boy who does something like this with his dad can he have any basis for expecting to be honored and respected by his child when he becomes a father after treating his father that way? Actually, no. Will the man married to such a woman as this be kind and considerate, or will he, unless he's a terribly weak man, be domineering and defensive in the face of his wife's overly aggressive behavior? What kind of boss needs that kind of employee? Let me tell you something about supervision, just off the top of my head. If any employee comes in with an attitude and says, if you don't give me a raise, I'm going to quit, do you know what the really sharp supervisor will say? He'll jump up and say, well, I'm really sorry that you've decided to leave. However, if you think it's good to resign, I'll be glad to write you a good reference to another job. Sorry to see you go. The security guard will be up in 5 minutes to escort you to the front gate. You're gone. You're gone. On the other hand, if you go to your boss and say something like this, boss, is there any way that you and I can work something out so that I can continue to work here and make what I'm really worth in the industry? Professionally and for my family's sake, I need to make what I'm worth, and I would like to make what I'm worth here. Can we talk about that? Would that be okay? If you approach your boss like that instead of the other way, you're much likely to get a lot farther along in the appeal. And that's because attitude is so important. Why? Because God resists the proud, and He gives grace to the humble. James 4:6 reads, but He giveth more grace, wherefore He saith, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. 1 Peter 5:5, likewise ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Yea, all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility. Why? For God resisteth the proud, and giveth grace to the humble. It's clear from the way these two verses that I've read to you are worded that God's resistance of the proud and His gift of grace to the humble is a pattern for God's dealings with His people. So be humble in your appeal and resist the temptation to imitate the wicked arrogance and demanding attitude of the world, because it doesn't work. You say, well, it works for me. Well, let's check with you in about 20 years and see how it's come along for you. Because you might be able to bulldoze a weakling, but over the long haul, if you don't approach this thing the right way, it will come back and bite you. Does anybody know where these bites are usually bitten? You usually get bit in the backside, don't you? I see Norm shaking his head. Yeah. So being willing to make an appeal in such a way that honors God, blesses God, seeks to do things according to God's will, and recognizing that this is one of the ways in which God reveals His will to me, by doing things the right way and then waiting for a heaven-sent outcome. Does anyone have a question on this so far this evening? You're just really not very cooperative with me at all tonight. I don't know. Is it because I'm making an appeal to you in front of other people? Is that what it is? Okay. All right. Would you pass your attendance slips to the nearest aisle, please? Please.